I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers for paying attention to have a session that focuses on women. In Staying Alive, Vandana Shiva explains how understanding women and men's roles as biologically determined is connected to environmentally unsustainable practices. She connects biological death to death of the feminine principle. In nature and in women, this death takes place by associating passivity with the feminine. In nature and men, death occurs when men move away from creativity to destruction and domination. Sustainable behavior must begin with the understanding that gender relations are socially constructed. Drawing on her Vedic Hindi heritage in her analysis of global environmental problems, Shiva links environmental sustainability with the wisdom of many life-affirming traditional practices. Sustainable development occurs when we affirm feminine principles as self-generated, nonviolent, creative activity, and male principles as empowering activity. Environmental degradation occurs when violence and aggression become the model of male activity, with women and nature turned into passive objects of violence. But there's more to life than just staying alive. This is where faith comes in. In his latest book, Flourishing: Why We Need Religion in a Globalized World, Miroslav Volf describes how world religions, despite their malfunctions, remain one of our most potent sources of moral motivation. They contain within them profoundly evocative accounts of human flourishing. Globalization should be judged, he says, by how well it serves us for living out our authentic humanity as envisioned within these traditions. Through renewal and reform, peaceful religious pluralism enables us to ask, as we remake the world, what kind of world are we making? What does it mean to live good lives in a globalizing world? Faith traditions have resources useful for sustainable development, but relatively few groups actually become publicly engaged. And there's good reason for caution lest their engagement become an argument for letting political states off the hook for shouldering responsibility for financial contributions to sustainable development. In the United States, politicians turned to the religious community to take on the government's responsibility for providing for the general welfare at the turn of the century. At the time, Ram Kannan, one of the speakers here, questioned whether the religious community had the capacity and capability to carry the additional burden. As early as 1999, he cautioned against romanticizing religious capabilities. When he did the math, each religious organization in the United States would have had to more than double their entire budget just to make up for the social service cuts that were being considered at that time at the White House. Quote, religious-based organizations should be considered a valuable community resource in a pool of caring public and nonprofit organizations, said Kannan, not the sole source of salvation, end quote. Drawing upon womanist black theology, Shaniqua Barnes also warns about how views of minority women being strong can result in them being given too heavy of a burden to bear. The ideology of minority women's strength and independence constrains their lives and predisposes them to physical problems. Environmental impacts do not affect women and men in the same ways. Take climate change. Women and men often do different work. Women's domestic duties can require more time as a result of climate-related water shortages, reduced mobility, and deforestation, meaning less time is available for schooling or paid work. Adjusting the male work model to fit the needs of women who bear most of the responsibility for children means more than offering microloans. It means addressing the work-life balance. Women who manage to survive often lack legal assets and rights to property. Livelihood scarcity leaves women to head households without the social stature or material resources to do so. But women are not merely victims. Women have important perspectives and indigenous knowledge important to sustainable solutions. Because women tend to do caregiving, they bring a wide age structure of children and the elderly when they get involved in social change. Inger Furseth compared the role of women in 4 historic religious and political movements in Norwegian history. She found that women were drawn to religious rather than political movements because it was in religious movements they were able to address everyday life issues related to their focus on individuals within the private sphere of home, family, or community of faith. The rewards of joining the religious movements translated into immediate improvement for themselves and their families and connected to their positions in family formation and socialization practices. The social changes that they initiated were comparatively stable because they affected a broader segment of the population. Women often used their homes as basic units for organizing within the movement, especially as a survival strategy during periods of repression and opposition. Women's religious involvement was often organized in opposition to the state church, as well as to society. The religious movement organizations provided women with leadership roles which partly embraced and partly subverted dominant ideals about gender relations. A similar pattern was observed among Egyptian women in Arab Spring, pictured here with a wide age structure. Investing directly in women can have a multiplier effect on poor economies. When financial aid is put in men's hands, it often leads to higher amount wasted on personal use. But when women are engaged as active players in economic development, often the quality of life is also improved for the most vulnerable members of the society. In Indonesia, almost 14% of the population, representing 9 million households, are headed by women due to the incapacity or absence of a male family member. If these women are not recognized as head of household, they are excluded from government programs for subsidized rice, health care, and cash transfer. PECA, Pemberdayaan Perempuan Kepala Keluarga, I'm probably massacring that, is an Indonesian non-governmental organization that focuses on empowerment for female-headed households by providing support structures for legal mobilization to a population of Muslim women who are substantially disconnected from the state. This self-directed women's grassroots empowerment program now operates in 19 provinces with a network of 749 groups and a membership of almost 17,000 female heads of household, bringing benefits to approximately 100,000 of their family members. Women who were previously invisible from the public arena are becoming empowered as active, legitimate community members. But a wide chasm remains between vulnerable women and institutional decision makers. The Sustainable Development Goals emphasize gender equality as a key theme throughout the agenda, but the distance between grassroots everyday living and policy making can result in devastating unintended consequences despite the best of intentions. Sabina Alkir, an ordained priest in the Church of England, hopes that a data revolution will address this chasm by making women's conditions more visible to policymakers. Her commitment to humanity and justice contributed to her sense of calling to create the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index for Sustainable Development. Drawing on the work of Amartya Sen, the index uses 10 weighted indicators in 3 areas: health, education, and living standards. Alkir's vocational calling to economics comes from her deep spiritual search for ways of helping the world's poor as a practical expression of her faith. Without accurate data, it is difficult to glean empirical lessons about how women, faith, and sustainable development interrelate in the real world. So how is the MPI index being used, and what are we learning as a consequence? Well, in 2010, the indicator was used to gather data from 11 countries in Central Africa. As the multidimensional poverty index changed, environmental problems reduced. The empirical lesson from this study was clear. Quote, better use of the Central Africa region's female population could reduce inequality and poverty, enhance economic, social, and environmental well-being, increase economic growth, and help ensure sustainable development in all 11 countries, end quote. Women of faith and faith communities are both making positive contributions to sustainable development, but the affirmation of life requires adjustments to how gender roles are frequently lived out. The social construction of gender roles contributes to both the problem and the solution. Although women are more impacted by environmental degradation than men, When empowered, they tend to bring more stable and broad-based changes to the community. Investing in women has a multiplier effect for environmental sustainability. When women exercise leadership roles in religious movement organizations, they partly embrace and partly subvert dominant ideals about gender relations. If gender equality keeps us alive, but spirituality enables us to thrive, perhaps subversive embrace of the complex interplay between women, faith, and sustainability will show us the road to human flourishing. Thank you.